eating disorders have the second highest mortality of any mental health disorder. People die from eating disorders. You've run the statistics for the year, it averages out to be every 52 minutes, somebody will die from an eating disorder.
Oh, God.
These are treatable illnesses that people are dying from. And that's alarming, right? That's not okay. And so I think it's the physical manifestations and impacts from eating disorders really tie just right in there with REDS, right?
Did you know the average woman spends 7 years of her life dealing with period pain? WaveBye believes it's time to get those years back. Founded by an OBGYN, WaveBye is the first science-backed solution that regulates menstrual cycle and reduces period pain before it even starts. WaveBye has 3 products. By Irregularity from WaveBye is designed to help your cycle find its rhythm again. Packed with clinically studied nutrients like inositol, magnesium, and chasteberry, By Irregularity supports healthy ovulation, hormone balance, and smoother, more predictable cycles without prescription or hormones. By Cramps and By Bad Cramps are the proactive premenstrual products that target the prostaglandin messengers that cause cramps and heavy bleeding, so your life doesn't have to stop every month. Think of it as the new Midol, backed by science, built by women, and designed to keep you feeling like yourself. Join the thousands who have already said it's absolutely life-changing, including myself. I've been taking this product every day for nearly 6 months. I take By Irregularity and By Cramps, and it has absolutely reduced my cramping and regulated my cycle. It is super predictable. So head to waveby.co and use the code Lindsey Cortes for 10% off. Say bye to irregular or painful cycles and hi to your true rhythm. Because when your cycle's in sync, everything else just flows. Lindsey Cortes for 10% off your WaveBye purchase. If you are or know somebody who may be struggling with an eating disorder, we strongly encourage you to reach out for help. Next week is National Eating Disorder Awareness Week, which is why I wanted our guest from the Emily program to come on today. There are many different resources for eating disorders. And the biggest thing we want to say is reach out and get help. You're going to hear today about the Emily program. You can go to emilyprogram.com and you can get help right away, submit a form, or call their phone number 888-364-5977. There are other resources as well. It is the National Eating Disorder Association that promotes National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. NEDA, they go by, and you can go to nationaleatingdisorders.org to learn more and to get help. Hello, fans and listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsey Elizabeth Cortes, registered dietitian, sports dietitian. And our guest today is Dr. Jillian Lampert. She is the Vice President of Strategy and Public Affairs for the Emily program, a national eating disorder treatment company. And that's why I thought it was really relevant to have Jillian on the show this week, because for your awareness as a listener, February 23rd to March 1st, 2026 is National Eating Disorder Awareness Week here in the U.S., and it's basically an annual campaign to educate the public, challenge stigma, and provide support for individuals affected by eating disorders, which we're going to get into today with Dr. Lampert. So back to her, I'm going to read off her bio for you. Dr. Lampert completed her doctorate degree in nutrition and epidemiology and a Master of Public Health degree in public health nutrition at the University of Minnesota. She earned a Master of Science degree in nutrition at the University of Vermont and completed her dietetic internship at the University of Minnesota Hospital and Clinics. She has an extensive range of experience in policy, clinical research, education, teaching, and program development in eating disorders. Jillian also serves as the Executive Director for the Emily Program Foundation and is the co-founder and president of the REDC, the National Consortium representing eating disorders care focused on treatment standards, best practices, access to care, and collaborative research. She is a board member and past treasurer of the Eating Disorder Coalition, a DC-based national organization for eating disorders policy and advocacy. and holds an adjunct graduate faculty position in the Department of Food, Science, and Nutrition at the University of Minnesota. Jillian, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Excited to be here. I love this topic, so I'm excited to share.
And I've been doing this podcast for, well, now that it's 2026, 6 years now. And I do believe, in my opinion, that I've spoken of and educated my listeners about eating disorders quite a bit. However, we get new listeners all the time. So I'd like to maybe open this conversation with covering a few basics. Like, what are eating disorders? Can we start there?
Yeah. For sure. It's always good to start at the basics, and things evolve and change a bit as we know, and with science and research and all the things.
Yeah.
So eating disorders at their simplest, they're really a disruption in somebody's relationship with food that has a negative impact on their life. That's probably the simplest version.
Yeah.
It's a longer version is that there's this disruption with their relationship with food, means that they're doing, they're experiencing changes in their eating it can be a lot of different ways. People can be eating too little. They can be eating too much. They can be using really dangerous behaviors to manage their weight, to try to control their weight. They can be avoiding food for reasons other than managing their weight, all kind of depending on what the eating disorder is. So it's really, we sort of say, and as a dietitian, I always say, eating disorders aren't really about food. They're a mental health diagnosis. They're considered a psychiatric illness. They aren't really about food, but they sure are about food when food shows up. So that's when we really see the difficulty that people have around simply having a really difficult time in some way with food. And that's often what people will notice themselves or in a loved one, like, what's going on there? In the setting of our culture that's so focused on food and eating and weight and body shape and size and athletic accomplishment, it can be hard to notice if somebody has that disruption in their relationship with food, though.
Absolutely. And I think we'll get into some, what some of those signs are, about what those disruptions will be in just a little bit. But I like that you brought up too, that it is a mental illness, and it's less about the food, except that it kind of shows itself when you're around food. And you also mentioned somebody's relationship with their body. This isn't always the case, but a lot of eating disorders do stem from that maybe concern over the body, the image, the shape, the size, the weight. But there also are categories of eating disorders that can also be like more sensory issues, perhaps, that really are kind of more food, I think a little bit more food specific, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you go through sort of the main eating disorder names that people sometimes are familiar with, some more than others, there's anorexia nervosa, which is usually people are a little bit familiar with that. It's people who are really tend to be visibly underweight, are eating minimal food. That's what we think of. That's sort of what we see in the media. Really, it is that. And also people can be struggling with anorexia and not be visibly underweight, which I think is a really key thing for people to know about. That we assume that everybody with an eating disorder, or sort of society assumes everybody with an eating disorder is really thin. And that's just not the case. People with eating disorders come in all sizes and shapes. But anorexia is really hallmarked by that. Not enough food for the person's needs, which then, of course, has a lot of different implications, and a fear of gaining weight, a fear of eating enough to have the body be where it needs to be. So that's anorexia. Bulimia nervosa, lots of times people are familiar with bulimia. People are aware that sometimes people self-induce vomiting after eating, or over-exercise after eating, or really minimize their food intake after eating in some way to sort of compensate for that overeating, that binge eating. Mm-hmm. So those two, sometimes people are familiar with. Binge eating disorder is getting a little bit more sort of play in the media, and people are a little bit more familiar with that. That's similar to bulimia in that people are overeating, but they're not experiencing that sort of compensation for what they've eaten. So they end up overeating, binge eating. And if we overeat it, for a continual period of time, our body's going to store that additional fuel as body fat, right? So we see people who end up gaining weight through that experience of the eating disorder, which that sort of has its own host of complexities because our society is so willing to tell people to lose weight. So binge eating disorder folks often experience a lot of weight loss messages. Yeah. And then the sensory one that you mentioned is super interesting. That's ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. So ARFID. And ARFID can be, there's a couple different varieties of it, but often it has to do with sensory difficulties with food. Like it just doesn't feel good to eat that. I'm afraid to eat that. I can't tolerate eating that, or I'm really afraid of what will happen if I eat it. Maybe I had an episode of choking as a child, and now I'm really worried that that's going to happen as I eat the next thing. So it could be a fear of the experience of eating or the consequence of eating. But like you said, it's not really related to like, I'd like to change my body. But of course, if people are avoiding eating, eventually it has an impact on their body. And then the last one is really mostly a catch-all category of something that's not quite one of those. That's called other OSFED, other specified feeding and eating disorder. That is really sort of almost one of the others, but not quite, is kind of the simple definition of that.
Right. Because we never want somebody to hold themselves back from receiving help with their relationship with food, body, or health just because they feel like, oh, I don't perfectly fit in that category of anorexia. I don't perfectly fit in this category of bulimia. It's like, but if you are experiencing discontentment, ill mental or physical health because of your relationship with food and body, that's worth getting help. And that's why I think that other category is so important, especially with athletes. That's, in my field as a sports dietitian working with athletes, it's like, I can't tell you how many people feel like, well, I'm not anorexic, I'm an athlete, or I am eating a lot for my needs, but kind of secretly hiding all these other things. But I don't ever want to tell anybody that because, I have this athletic persona and image that I need to show. And we want to, just kind of open. I think that other category is so, so important, which I have one other question. Because I haven't actually looked into like the updated research, but where does orthorexia fall? This is definitely something worth getting treatment. Is it technically, I don't know if that matters, but is it technically considered by the diagnostic standards an eating disorder, or is orthorexia in that other category?
Yeah, it's a great question because orthorexia gets a lot of sort of more play in the media because it I think people can like attach to it like, oh yeah, an obsession with healthy eating is really what orthorexia is describing. And that describes a lot of people's experience with food, but it's technically not an eating disorder. It's not in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual or the DSM, which is sort of the book of diagnosis for mental health disorders. It's not in that manual. So it won't go on a medical record or a billing code. So from a technical perspective, no, it's not. And to your point, absolutely. If you find yourself really obsessing over being really, really healthy with everything you eat, which makes sense again in our culture, particularly for athletes where there's so much emphasis on health and performance, it can be hard to know, like, is this something that's wrong, or am I just doing my sport? Is it something that's different and I need help with, or is it just how life is? So I think orthorexia is helpful to help people just have a name for something that feels like, oh, maybe this is more than just being concerned about my performance.
Man, that is such a good point because that is it. It's we say things like being athletes. Part of the job is being disciplined, taking care of your body and your health, and so food is part of that. I'm a sports dietitian. If you want to train and compete at a high level, you've got to fuel your body, and so you're going to have to care about nutrition. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's good to care about nutrition. It's good to want to be healthy. Where things get tricky is how are we defining healthy?
Yeah.
And what is, are we truly understanding the science as well behind what healthy for performance means? Because we get so many messages from our culture that'll say healthy is a salad or healthy is, avoiding processed sugar. And yet for athletes, it's like, oh, if you do that, you're might be underfueled, might be. I'm not saying salads are bad. I love me a salad, but you might be underfueled. You might not be getting the carbs you need. Actually, sugar could fuel your performance. It could actually help you, right? And so, we so often these athletes that were concerned about being healthy and that's good. You want to do what you need to do to take care of your body and perform at the highest level, but we need to make sure that we're defining that individually for ourselves and not getting that mixed up with some diet culture messages.
Absolutely. Well, it also makes me think too, we know so much more about the temperament aspects of eating disorders, and those are genetically mediated temperament aspects of eating disorders. And it turns out the temperaments of people who are most at risk for eating disorders they also have temperaments that tend to make them pretty good athletes.
Yeah.
Right? People who are really persistent, they can persevere even when it hurts. Well, that can be really helpful in your performance as an athlete, right? They tend to be very focused on sort of rules and and understanding how to make things the best. Well, also great if you're really trying to optimize your performance as an athlete. They also tend to be, really wanting to do a good job and to make sure that they're meeting the bar and to push themselves even further. So again, those temperamental traits we see in people with eating disorders are the ones that show up in people who really end up being really successful athletes, which is why athletes are at an even higher risk for eating disorders than their non-athletic peers, particularly when they get into those more elite levels of sports. So that, I always tell parents, I did my dissertation looking at different sports participation in kids eating in 7th and 10th graders. And parents, I think, get concerned, like, should my kid, how do I think about this for my child? Yeah. That, being in sports has so many fantastic benefits. And as your loved one gets in more elite levels of sport, they definitely have a higher risk of developing eating disorder behaviors or having an eating disorder because of the increased pressure. And so we really need to be thinking about how are people hearing those nutrition messages and how are they able to get the support they need from professionals. Like, there's a lot of nutrition information out there, like you said. And I love a good, look at all of us dietitians. I love a good nutrition topic. And there's so much false information out there that can really lead people to make decisions that are harmful to their performance.
So stemming off of that, considering temperament, personality traits that kind of overlap between what it takes to be a great athlete also tends to be things that overlap with developing an eating disorder. At what point then is it okay, these things help me, being disciplined, wanting to do what's right, enjoying the pain. That's another thing. Not only can athletes withstand the pain, they seem to enjoy it. And that we can, that happens with eating, people get enjoyment out of restricting or following their diet perfectly, things like that. So at what point do we know this has crossed a line to where, okay, these personality traits and temperament things kind of helped us achieve a certain level of success? And at what point, maybe some signs or symptoms, is it actually this is now hurting me and this is a sign that this is a disorder and that treatment is needed?
Yeah. I think that it's a good question. The line is sometimes not very clear. I sometimes wish there was such a clear line we could tell people, once this happens, then very bad.
Yeah.
I think with athletes, the things to look for, when people are doing, or you yourself are doing something different than everybody else. If everybody else in your team is not doing what you're doing, that's an interesting question to ask yourself. Why am I doing this training in this particular way that seems to be overtraining when nobody else is? Why am I eating in this way that seems to be kind of different than everybody else? And so that's a question people can ask, because if that was such a great idea to train that way or to eat that way, then probably more people would do it, right? Mm-hmm. And probably the team would do it, or your coach or the other folks working with you would be counseling you to do those things. But when you start to do things in secret, I think that's always a really great hallmark, that if you don't want to tell somebody what you're doing, or you're afraid what would happen if somebody knew what you were doing, like when I had an eating disorder and I was out running at 10 o'clock at night, I never told anybody I was doing that. That's a terrible idea. It is an unsafe thing to do. It was a terrible idea. It was a risky thing to do. And I never told anybody I did that. And if somebody would have asked me, I would have denied it. And so that's a sign that when you don't want to tell somebody what you're doing, or you don't want to talk about it, or if somebody asks you about it, you get really defensive, or if you're asking your teammate about it and they get really defensive, that can be one of the most visible signs sometimes, because oftentimes people are doing sort of their unique, nutrition related things for them and for their performance. So it's a little hard to tell if everyone's doing different things.
Right.
But I think that's one of those ways, little litmus tests. Can you talk about what you're doing comfortably? And would you be willing to tell your coach, your teammates, your friends, your loved ones? And if you're not, that's something to think about.
And I
Getting
think
some help
this
with.
is so important too, because some of the words that you just mentioned are like, doing things in secret, feeling guilt or shame, being in denial, becoming defensive. These all have negative connotations. If you're living your life being defensive, in denial, feeling guilt or shame or in secrecy, this is why this kind of stems back to a mental health disorder too, because this is not creating a healthy mental environment for you. So
Right.
yes, an eating disorder might show up in your actions and behaviors towards food, exercise, and body, but when it's affecting you with your feelings and your thoughts and that negativity, I think that's, even though it's this still not a clear distinction, it's something that's like, are you living with peace, joy, contentment, happiness, hope, or are you living with negativity, shame, guilt, secrecy, isolation?
Absolutely. Like we always use the iceberg analogy of it. You can, just see the tip of the iceberg, but underneath, for somebody who's struggling with eating disorders, an eating disorder or eating disorder behaviors, there's so much under the water that you can't see. People are thinking about food 24 hours a day. They're dreaming about it. They're trying to sort of imagine how they can get through their day with nobody knowing about the things they're doing in secret. They do a lot of math. Eating shouldn't be a lot of mental gymnastics. There
Yeah.
shouldn't be a lot of math. That yes, we all have to think about what we're eating, and particularly as you're an athlete, you have to think a little bit more and in some specific ways. But if that iceberg is enormous under the water, that's when we really know people are in trouble, and it's hard to see, right? So it's helpful to ask people like, tell me about how you think about food. Like, what do you think about related to food all day long? How does that fit into your life? Where does it fit in your life?
Yeah.
So you can kind of get a flavor of what's happening.
Jillian, that's actually a question that I ask any new client that I take on is how often throughout the day do you think about food? And some people, it's a very quick, like all the time. And other people are like, kind of give me a percentage, 60%, 80%, whatever. But it's one of those things because, again, this comes up with athletes. Is like, I have to think about food. I'm supposed to think about nutrient timing, what I'm eating. And like, I have to. Yes, you do. But it shouldn't be all day long. It shouldn't
Right.
be, I'm thinking about food all the time. I can't think about anything else. I can't focus on my homework because I'm thinking about food and I'm getting up to go to the kitchen all the time. Or I can't sit through class because I'm thinking about when I'm going to get out of class to eat and what I'm going to eat and how much. Should I have the full bar or half the bar? And it's like, it's too much, right? All athletes should be thinking about, we need some education baseline. So sometimes you do have to kind of invest time thinking about food so that you can learn, because we don't do a great job in our, public school system learning about foods. I understand you get to higher level athletics, you might need to educate yourself, work with a dietitian, do some trial and error. You got to educate yourself on food. But then after that, it's like, okay, now I have breakfast, I have pre-workout, I have post-workout, I have snack, I fuel up, I recover. I don't think about food in between these time periods.
Right.
I think that's
Right.
such a great question that I've used in my practice for years now is how often throughout the day are you thinking about food?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's, for me, sometimes it's helpful to ask people or to sort of put it into other contexts to illustrate how, like, yeah, that is strange that I think about food that much. For people like, your nutrition, like you're saying, your nutrition, your fueling is is a tool. It's a set of tools.
Yes.
It's your tools that you're going to use when you need them. Just like your, Google Maps is a tool when you need to go on a journey. If you're sitting in class thinking about how you're going to get Google Maps turned on and where it's going to take you and how you're going to get there because you have to go somewhere after class, and you're like, I wonder if it'll work. And I wonder if my phone is the right size to show the Google Map journey, like all this, that's ridiculous, right? Nobody does that.
That's such a good
That's the
analogy.
kind of thinking
Yeah.
that people with eating disorders find themselves doing. And it sometimes becomes so familiar that it doesn't even seem strange anymore. But if again, if they were like telling somebody that dialogue in their head, people would be like, oh, that's different than how I think about food. That's different than how I use Google Maps.
Right.
So I think sometimes helping people to get out of the food perspective can reduce the defensiveness and also help illustrate, like, this is sort of the like normal, quote unquote, or the, typical amount of time it should take or probably takes you to think about fueling yourself. And it sounds like you were spending a lot more time than that. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Fans, I'm pausing the conversation again to check in on you. Are you concerned that you have REDS? That's relative energy deficiency in sport. It's a syndrome of not ideal health consequences and performance consequences that all stem from the idea that you're not fueling optimally or fueling enough for your sport needs. I've become an expert in this over the years because unfortunately, a lot of female athletes struggle with this. We have research that shows sometimes up to 90% of female athletes might be suffering from at least one of the side effects of REDS. Other research says that up to 45% of female athletes are struggling with disordered eating. These are big statistical numbers, and I don't like it. I'm here to help you become fierce, fit, and fueled. So first and foremost, head to lindseycortes.com/REDS to learn more about REDS, listen to past podcast episodes, and take our free REDS quiz to see if this might be a concern for you. From there, I've got 3 ways to help you. 1, download the REDS Recovery Guide and start taking action right away. 2, join our REDS Recovery membership. For a very affordable $15 a month, you will have access to me as a sports dietitian to educate and empower you to fuel better. We meet once a week for live calls, Q&A. You have access to the recordings if you can't join live, and a community group chat to support, encourage, and motivate you along the way to fuel fiercely. Last, spots are limited for one-on-one help, but I can help you personally through one-on-one coaching, be it my Fast Track program, the Female Athlete System of Transformation, or perhaps Fuel School, depending on your age. All of that is on my website, lindseycortes.com. But because one-on-one spots are limited, I really want to encourage you to join the REDS Recovery membership. We live in a world where it's very easy to just pop online, read an article, listen to a podcast, and I think we do a decent job at getting information out there, but we all need someone to talk to and really ask those personal questions, and also be open and honest in a community that's going to support you in your fueling needs and goals. And that's exactly what this membership is. So only $15 a month. We meet once a week, and you will be provided with so much education and empowerment and support. I know you won't regret joining. Head to lindseycortes.com/REDS, and there you will see the REDS Recovery membership that you can join. And join us this week. It's time for you to be fierce, fit, and fueled. So all of these are great points about, when do you seek treatment? Kind of talked about how it's taking over, your thoughts, your behaviors. And not all eating disorders have very physical or clinical outcomes, but they certainly can. Could we run through a list? And I know it's different depending on the disorder, but in my field of sports nutrition, we've, over the past 10, 11 plus years now, coined a term, relative energy deficiency in sport, that a lot of athletes can resonate with a little bit more so than resonating with like an eating disorder. But it can be related to an eating disorder, or it could not be. These can be independent things. But ultimately, one of the things is that in REDS, there's an energy deficiency. It's not enough fuel. So this might overlap with something like anorexia or a restrictive type eating disorder, where ultimately the body physically, a sign of REDS is the body starts physically showing, or not just physically, but internally showing clinical manifestations, things like hormone disruption, decreased performance, poor recovery, altered heart rate, muscle declines, bone issues, bone injury. So we can see those clinical manifestations with REDS, and I've spoken about that on other podcasts. But anything you want to add to this, because for example, with bulimia, that's something where we really need to be concerned about electrolyte balances. This can be very, very, very dangerous. And I like to stay positive on this podcast, but I also want people to understand that as much as this is a mental health disorder, there can be very severe clinical consequences to your physical health. And that is why, treatment is just so, so, so important, because it's sad to see that happen to somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. I think it's there's so much positive perspective it can bring to this. And eating disorders have the second highest mortality of any mental health disorder. People die from eating disorders. You run the statistics for the year, it averages out to be every 52 minutes, somebody will die from an eating disorder.
Oh, God.
These are treatable illnesses that people are dying from. And that's alarming, right? That's not okay. And so I think it's the physical manifestations and impacts from eating disorders really tie just right in there with REDS, right? That if you don't have enough energy, your body's going to start to slow down everything that it can, so it can protect itself. And one of those things that's going to start to slow down is your heart, right? You pointed out that sort of low heart rate, Well, if you add on top of that sort of slowdown in the body because it doesn't have enough nutrients, doesn't have enough nutrition to keep everything running at top speed, obviously it'll impact your performance at some point. But if your heart doesn't have what it needs, and to your point earlier, if you're purging, which can happen with bulimia, it can happen in anorexia. There's a form I should have mentioned earlier. There's a form of anorexia that people are binging and purging. So purging isn't just happening with people with bulimia. Then if you're purging, then your electrolytes are getting disrupted. That's putting your cardiac health at even greater risk because of the way that it impacts your electrolytes and how that impacts your heart. So if your heart doesn't have enough fuel, and now it also doesn't have the electrolytes it needs to beat correctly, your risk of cardiac arrest is really high. And those are the things that we see with people with eating disorders is sudden cardiac arrest that they had.
And now let's add intense exercise on top of that. Oh my God, their heart, you got to think about your heart. This is keeping you alive. Oh, so scary. And, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge even eating disorders where maybe underfueling is not the issue, maybe overfueling, binge eating, but think about your GI system. And people feel this. I know they feel it. They've told me how uncomfortable they are, but I mean, fecal impactation, getting completely blocked up, all that waste in your body, issues with your esophagus, acid, all this stuff. It's just, that I think, I don't know if you want to add more to that, but we want to also acknowledge that those, can be real concerns that create not just the negative mental, but of, guilt and shame and questions that's very serious, but also the, we have to take care of our bodies, and that's not taking care of our body.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can impact your GI system. So many people go in for a GI complaint. They have gas, they're bloated, they're constipated, and they don't mention that they're binging multiple times a day, or they don't mention that they're purging because mostly people don't ask them. So why would you disclose something that you're, have some shame around or something nobody asked you? And those impacts on your GI system can be really significant, can be very dangerous, and also extraordinarily uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, people are seeking, like, I'm physically uncomfortable. How do I help myself feel physically better? That can be a really difficult setup for people, like eating more because they already feel terrible. So they're binging on top of binging. All of those sort of behaviors can compound because we just feel bad. And so that, you're right. There's impacts on bone health, there's impacts on endocrine health, there's impacts on really every system of the body can be impacted by an eating disorder. There's dental impacts. So really
dental
is,
impacts.
So much potential for damage to the body. And I think that's part of the shame and stigma that goes with eating disorders, because these eating disorder behaviors are things, the other thing I want to be really clear about, and I told every patient I've ever seen in family program this, like, eating disorder behaviors were not invented by people with eating disorders. Eating disorder behaviors are things that human beings do sometimes, that the people with eating disorders are on the ends of that sort of spectrum. They do them a lot more. But people in our culture diet, they fast, they skip meals, they take supplements that they don't need to allegedly pump up their metabolism. They take, laxatives that they don't need. They take all kinds of things. We fall into those messages about how we can improve our health in all sorts of ways. And people also overeat in all kinds of ways. People also sometimes make themselves throw up because they feel uncomfortable. Sometimes people do all kinds of things, right? And people with eating disorders are doing more of those things. But it's not like people with eating disorders have invented those behaviors.
Right.
And so it's really important to think about how we're really thinking about the shame that goes with talking about something that you're doing a lot of, that like other people are doing, but it's kind of clear you shouldn't talk about it. And I think that adds to people's difficulty physically, because they go in to see their primary care doc or to see some sort of medical professional, and they don't mention the things they're doing that are eating disorder behaviors because they're really kind of embarrassing or they're really shameful. So that's a really key thing to think about. If you're struggling with any of this, it's okay to talk about it. And even if you go to a physician who doesn't know anything about eating disorders, they might say something not helpful. They really might, because they don't have enough training. We all know that physicians don't have enough training in eating disorders, and
or food at all.
Really help. Or food at all, nutrition not at all.
And I understand they're doctors of medicine. I get it, but
they have other things, and we'd like them to, certainly partner more, maybe with the dietitians to do more. but that they need to know. It's really important that they have all the information so they can actually care for you the best they can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So thank you for going down the rabbit hole of let's talk about the negative and the real serious consequences, because I think it's just, I haven't talked about that in a while. I don't know the last episode I really dug into that. So we want people, because the point I want to get across is we want people to get better. We want you to feel good in your body. We want you to think about food in a healthy way that makes you happy and then you can move on. We want you to fuel your body so that it's functioning well. And so we want you to get help. If you're struggling with these negative things, the mental, the more clinical, or both, we want you to get help. So, Jillian, tell us a little bit about the Emily program. And ultimately, it's a treatment center. But so tell us about, what is the Emily program? Maybe what makes it a little unique compared to any other treatment centers as well. That would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Emily program, like you said, is a comprehensive eating disorder program. We have all levels of care for treatment of people with eating disorder. And what that means is that we basically have everything that somebody could need, whether it's a 24-hour stay in an inpatient level of care where there's lots of doctors and nurses around attending to some of these medical, physical consequences we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
There's residential level of care, which is slightly less intensive than inpatient, but similar, 24 hours a day, often in a more home-like setting. Certainly at the Emily program, it's a much more sort of home-like setting where people spend anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, which is a big period of time. We can get back to sort of talking about how to fit treatment in your life. But there's inpatient, there's residential, then there's this thing called partial hospital program, which is just a weird name, but it really means you're spending part of the day in treatment. And that's about 6 hours a day. At the Emily program, you come into a building and you eat 2 meals and a snack and have lots of therapy groups and lots of nutrition education and lots of medical and psychiatric help. Or you might do that online, which is the other interesting part about treatment these days. It's much different than it was 5 years ago.
Right.
That a lot of treatment is available virtually, which can sometimes fit better into people's schedules. Then there's intensive outpatient, which is this 3-hour-a-day program. It's a little bit like, I always tell my patients, like IOP, intensive outpatient, is like a part-time job because you're there like 10, 15 hours a week.
Yeah.
PHP or this partial hospital, that's like a full-time job because you're there like 40 hours a week. And then residential, it's kind of like camp because you're going to go somewhere and do that. And then that baseline level is outpatient where you're seeing your dietitian, you're seeing your therapist, you might be seeing a physician, maybe a psychiatrist. So an answer to your question about what makes us unique at the Emily program is that we have all of those levels of care.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of eating disorder programs, sure, good programs, but a lot of programs only have a couple levels of care. Maybe they just have inpatient and residential, or maybe they just have outpatient, or maybe they're just an outpatient virtual service, but we have all of it. And so we have that because ever since the Emily program started in 1993, it was founded in 93 in Minnesota by a psychologist whose sister's name is Emily. That's where the name came from.
Yeah.
He had an eating disorder. His sister Emily had an eating disorder. They had terrible experiences. Nobody knew what to do. And he really wanted to create a program where people with eating disorders were understood.
Yeah.
I've been at the Emily program for almost 20 years. And for somebody like myself with a personal experience of an eating disorder and a clinician, like working in that setting where we really, we get it. We get it. We've been there. We understand what eating disorders are. And we're trying to, every day, create and morph and evolve this program to be what people with eating disorders need in the ways that they need it. So I think that's part of what makes us unique. We're located kind of across the country, Washington, Minnesota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, kind of across the U.S. We're really invested in people getting care for as long as they need it. So we always say to clients, we want to be here with you for as long as you need to do the work you came to do.
Yeah.
And that's our promise to people. We're going to be with you while you do this thing. And sometimes that means you'll need to come back a lot. Sometimes it means you'll come for a period of time and you'll be done and you'll never need us again. And it varies, and we are going to be there. So that's part of what I think makes it really special, that we get it from the inside out, and we've created and continue to create a program that really meets people where they are, whether they're athletes, non-athletes, adults, kids, all age groups, all everything. We're sort of, eating disorders don't discriminate across everything, and neither do we. So we want to be there for people.
I really appreciate that honesty that, people might come, get their treatment, and they might be good, but also Maybe they need to come back, or maybe they need a different level of care. But what I appreciate about the way that you presented it is just how welcoming it's we're here for you. So maybe you're receiving treatment now and then you're good, and 5 years down the road, life changes, something happens, we're here for you. Come back.
Yep.
And I just, I think I'm putting this in the mindset of an athlete, because this is what I see. So many athletes are like that when they finally come to terms that, okay, this is a problem, this is a disorder, I'm going to receive treatment. They're so goal oriented. I'm going to go for 6 weeks. I'm going to be fixed. I'm going to fix myself. I'm going to be rid of the eating disorder, and then I'm getting back to sport, and everything's going to be amazing. And
Yep.
I actually love that. Because you got to set goals for yourself. If you take on the perspective of like, oh, I'm going to have this for my whole life, and it's okay if you do, but I understand like the setting a goal of like, I'm going to give this everything I've got to recover. I think you're going to get so far with the goal setting. So that's, I think athletes can use that goal setting and drive, going back to the beginning conversation, things that make you so good at becoming an athlete. Maybe that can be exactly what helps you recover from this eating disorder. And yet the Emily program is here for you even after you get to that goal, or maybe your goals change, or it takes a little longer than you intended. I just love the way you presented it, that we are here for you no matter what stage, no matter what level of care, no matter how much time has gone by, we're here for you.
Absolutely. Yep. And we really want to be there. If I could talk about one of my, I know I shouldn't have a favorite athlete, but I do at the moment, because my favorite athlete at the moment is Jessie Diggins, who's been really, really public about her eating disorder, and really public about the fact that she got treatment at the Emily program. And I could talk all day about Jessie, but she's an amazing human and an amazing spirit, just a lovely person and an amazing athlete. And the most decorated Olympic U.S. cross country skier we've had. Mm-hmm. So I think that one of the things that really resonates so much for me with stories like Jessie's, which are not unique to Jessie, but Jessie got treatment for her eating disorder first when she was about 18. She came to the Emily program, engaged in treatment, and she is very public about this. Sort of tells the story that she had that approach, like, I'm coming in, gonna get this done, going to be done with it and move on, and realized like, oh, I really need to dig in here and do a lot of work and figure out how this all goes, and stay longer than I thought it was going to take to really feel solid in my recovery. And that's a really common experience for athletes and non-athletes alike. And the neat piece, I think, for athletes is that, like, can I do my sport while I'm in treatment? Do I have to stop competing? Do I have to stop training? And that's really individual. I want to be really clear about that, I think over my 30 years in the field as an eating disorder dietitian and a treatment, leader, we've changed how we approach athletes. Like, it used to kind of be, nope, you're on the bench until you're better. And that approach probably wasn't so helpful for a lot of people, because it really took them out of something that they loved. It took them out of something that really focused their energies. It took them out of the flow of things. So we are with so much more that we know both about eating disorders and fueling athletes. We're much more able to individualize that process now, to say like, okay, what do you need to be able to continue to compete? Like, you need to be able to feel yourself. Right. If you can't feel what you're doing, then you got to fuel more or do less. Like, that's when the math comes in, right? Like, you just have to support what you're doing. I always tell my clients, like, you can do what you want, just be able to explain it. And if you can't explain it or you can't support it, then maybe it's not the right thing to do. So from a treatment perspective, that's really, I think, an important message, that if you're an athlete and you're struggling with an eating disorder, and you're worried that if you go in for treatment at the Emily program or anywhere else, they're going to like take your participation in your sport away, or they're going to take your eating disorder away. We can't take much away. So we really can help you to get what you need. And so I think that's a change that I've seen in the practice of the eating disorder field. Like, we're really going to work with individual athletes to figure out, can you compete? Can you train? How does that look? When do you need to take a break? What does that break look like? And I think that's what Jessie's story really has been. And she's been so beautifully open in the media about her relapse, right? She had an eating disorder around age 18. She went up and won a gold medal in 2018 and catapulted herself onto the world stage as somebody who was an amazing Olympian, an amazing champion, and had an eating disorder. And she said in a lot of interviews, like, I didn't think I could talk about it until after I won a medal. And then I kind of like was safe enough to talk about it, which is unfortunate that we should be able to talk about stuff no matter our mental status. But that really gave her a platform to be able to talk about it. And so she's an amazing ambassador for people with eating disorders. But when she relapsed, she called me and said, I want to know if the Emily program is going to want to continue this ambassadorship, this relationship we have, because I have relapsed and I need some help. And I teared up and I said, Jessie, we are going to be here with you every step of the way. That's what we do. Like, what do you need? What can I get you? What do you need? How can we help? And so she said, we are absolutely going to keep our relationship with you going. This is so critical. Your voice is so important. And she was able to get connected to what she needed in terms of being able to address her health and address her needs and address her ongoing participation in sports, and continues to be amazing and be an amazing voice for the subject of eating disorders. So I love that she, as such an exceptional athlete and such an exceptional person, and also a really down to earth, everyday, normal person, has been able to raise the visibility of this, because I think athletes need to hear that. It's okay. You can get help and you can actually keep going in your sport. We're going to help you do that. We're going to figure it out for you, whether that's, we're certainly going to do that at the Emily program, but that's what you need. That's what you need, is a treatment team that will do that with you.
Oh, I really want to highlight team. The word you just said, team. You're the treatment team, but it's like the Emily program has been part of Jessie's team. You're with her throughout it, no matter what, level of success she's having with sport, no matter what stage in her relationship with food, body, and exercise she is, you are on her team. So yes, she got herself to a great place and was seeing, recovery and was seeing success with sport. And then she found herself in a place where things weren't so good again. And you were still her team by her side. I think that's just so important for athletes to think about their journey with recovery or whatever treatment place, people, facilities, whatever team they link up with to support them in their journey with food. This is my team. I'm going to be with my team when I'm at my greatest and when I'm at my lowest. And so I think I agree with you that, Jessie, she's been an advocate and doing a lot of advocacy work for the past 10 plus years in the space of eating disorders, being very honest. And her ability to be honest about relapse is so powerful as well, because she called you up. She's getting help, right? And that's what we want. That in and of itself is just so relieving for other people struggling to hear, okay, if I was good and now I'm not, it's okay to ask for help again. It's okay to need more support from my team, And I also think I want to highlight too, that Jessie, with being such a great athlete too, there's 1,000 things that contribute to winning Olympic medals or getting on the world stage or just finding athletic success. There's 1,000 things that contribute to that. But I do believe that her linking up with the Emily program, her receiving treatment at age 18, starting that process, is certainly one of those factors. So I remember when I first became a dietitian, when I first began specializing in disordered eating with athletes, I remember having a conversation with somebody who actually was also working in the space of eating disorders, but she was very young in her career and she was working in a hospital setting. And I remember telling her, oh, I work with athletes with disordered eating and eating disorders as well. And she was like, athletes can't have eating disorders. She's like, because she was very much in that, like, in the hospital setting, she's like, you can't be an athlete with an eating disorder. It's like, well, yeah, they exist.
Right.
So they exist, and therefore we need to help them. And so again, going back to a conversation that you mentioned, is like, we don't want to create this idea of, hey, if you're an athlete and you have an eating disorder, we shut down you can't be an athlete anymore and you have to go sit in a hospital bed and blah, blah, blah. Although I do understand that might be somebody's situation, if severe enough, and in that situation, that is what you need to do to live and get back to sport. But, every situation is individualized. And so I love hearing that with the Emily program, you're going to work with athletes as well. And how do we best get them to thrive? And clearly you've done that with Jessie. She received treatment and is one of the world's greatest cross-country skiers, certainly here in the US. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing to be part of, now our function as, the part of her team that we are her cheerleaders. We're like, you go get, we love that she wears our logo on her hat. We love that she talks about eating disorders. Like, we're her biggest cheerleaders, biggest fans. She's got her treatment team set up the way that she has in her structure that she needs. And I think that's important to know too, that your team can change, it can morph, it can grow, it can shift. And it's always important to reach out, to like start somewhere, to reach out for help. But to your point that I mean, we're so honored to be part of anybody's journey to find eating disorder recovery. And we have the unique opportunity to be public about how honored we are to be part of Jessie's experience, because she's talked about it. But she told a story once to a gathering we had where it was before she won the gold medal in Pyeongchang. She had a race before that didn't go very well. And she was under the bleachers riding an exercise bike to stay warm, thinking about how, perseverating about how that race didn't go well. As so many of us do when things don't go well.
Absolutely.
Right? We just keep dissecting it and think through it. And what could I have done? How could I have made that race better? And she said, it brought tears to my eyes. She said, I tapped into what I learned at the Emily program about how to let something go and to learn from it and let it go and move on. And that's what I did on that bike under the bleachers in the Olympics. I took what I learned at the Emily program, and the next race she won a gold medal. So that is, such a cool thing. But I think that's the piece that we really want to let people know. Like, you can, there's life through, after an eating disorder. Recovery is possible. You're going to learn things in treatment. Treatment's hard. It's not easy. I wish it was easier. It's not. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of determination and dedication and perseverance. A lot of those traits that athletes have. So, come on in, you're going to be good at treatment.
I say that too.
Good at those things.
I try and motivate my athletes who are struggling too with you're the exact type of person who can recover from this because you are determined.
Yep. You want to do this yourself? We are going to tap into all of that. Yes. You are going to get this done. Let's do it. We're part of your team. So I think it is so hopeful. And I think that's what I always underscore too. Like, it's so hopeful. And even if you have, like Jessie, you have a dozen years of recovery and then the eating disorder comes back, we can do more. Like, you can feel better. It's going to be there's still hope. And I have a lot of people who say to me once they, hear I work in eating disorders or had an eating disorder, like, oh, that's something somebody lives with their whole life. Right. And I'm like, no, I don't. And I know at this point, thousands of people who I've worked with who don't have an eating disorder right now, but they did.
Right.
It's definitely something you can get better from. And if it comes back later on down the road, it's still something you can get better.
Yeah. And I think because I agree with you completely. I've always struggled with people who kind of say, oh, I'm going to live with this my whole life, because you don't have to. But I think where the gray area is that, well, we do have a relationship with food and body our whole life.
Right.
Right. And so, yes, you are always going to have a level of, I'm thinking about food, I'm thinking about body. And I'm engaging in actions that have to do with food and body. But that line of is this a disorder or not is where you can get better. They're so hopeful. And our relationship with food does require work, just like your relationship with anything requires work. You want to have a good relationship with your partner, with your spouse, with your best friend. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm going to spend 3 weeks with my best friend to create an amazing relationship and then never talk to them again. Right. No, you have to, if you want to maintain a good relationship with your best friend, you're going to have to continue to put effort and intention into that friendship. And that's the same thing. We can go into a treatment facility, the Emily program, and get to a better place and strengthen our relationship with food and body. And then it can, the rest of our lives, it requires work, but it doesn't always have to be so intensive or so hard. It can just be, right? And I think that's kind of, where that difference is, and why Jessie, again, bringing the story back to her, is so powerful, that she got to a great place. And as an athlete, always had to still care about food on some level, think about how she was fueling to get those gold medals. And then, okay, now I'm in a not great place. I need to put more work into this relationship. So we're allowed to ebb and flow like that throughout our lives.
Absolutely. Yep. And there's we're still going to be our persevering, detail-oriented, detail noticing selves, that's probably not going to change. Those are good things. Those are great qualities. Just we want to have the food and body and weight and all of that noise, not take advantage of all those great traits. So I always tell people, like, you're going to recover to be you. I'm not going to change your fundamental you-ness. You're just going to be the best version of yourself you want to be. We can do that.
Well, Jillian, what an educational and inspiring conversation. Thank you so much. I want to make sure that we give our listeners some actionable steps, perhaps specifically about the Emily program and like what are those first steps for getting help? Where should people look? How should they research?
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who's remotely concerned that they or a loved one is struggling with an eating disorder, get some more information. Our website, emilyprogram.com, is full of information about eating disorders, full of information about how to approach somebody that you're worried about. So really, the step one is to reach out to get more information. And the first step in getting help, you get your information, you're learning, you're looking at websites, you're getting more information about what eating disorders are. The next step is calling, or, you could do on the Emily program website, you can put in your name and your phone number. We'll call you. Like, it's really easy to like do it, except it's really hard to do it. So I always tell people, just do it. Just make the call. Just put your name and phone number in. Let us call you. That's one of the scariest parts of eating disorder treatment. I love the story that Jessie used to tell, where she was like walking back and forth on the carpet at her house before she called the Emily program the first time. And she said, I think I wore a line in the carpet. I was so nervous to call.
Yeah.
If that's really hard to do it with a friend, do it with a loved one, have them pick up the phone, have them dial for you, hold the phone up to your ear, get some help, but make the call. So that's super easy to do on the Emily program website. That's going to start the process. And then you're going to get a lot of questions asked. People are going to try to figure out what the best fit for you is. So for us, it's really a quick first phone call, 10, 15 minutes, then another longer phone call, maybe 45 minutes. And then we're going to help you get to the right place. So start, emilyprogram.com. You can follow the Emily program on social media. We have a lot of great information and inspiration. Ton of Jessie Diggins. We love Jessie. So really check it out and get informed, get help. Don't wait. Do not wait. The longer you wait, the longer you're going to have an eating disorder. The short, if you do it, the less time you're going to have an eating disorder.
I love that. I love that motivation there. And the urge to pick up the phone and make the human connection, because it's so easy to get lost on websites and even podcasts and thinking, I can learn, I can educate. Great. You can have all the knowledge, but you have to begin the transformation. And that starts with connecting with another human being who can help you begin that journey of transforming and begin to really make changes. And I'm not saying that you can't make any progress on your own, but I am really trying to encourage people that, when you have professionals and somebody like yourself, you have worked in the space, you have also lived experiences. And it sounds like, even the Emily program itself was founded by people who went through this themselves. You will get, I think I'm just going to go back to that word team, your treatment team. We have coaches in our sport. We have teammates in our sport. Even individual sports like track and field and cross-country skiing, you still have a team, you still have a coach, and we need that in our eating recovery as well. So pick up the phone. Thank you so much for urging people to do that. Make that human connection, get your team in place, and they'll figure out the next steps from there.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Thank you so much for this conversation and enlightening us, educating us, empowering us.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Thank you for having it. It's such an important conversation.
Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Please help spread the message of empowering female athletes to be fierce, fit, and fueled by giving this podcast a 5-star review and leaving a comment. You can also help more female athletes by sending this episode to a friend. Head to lindseycortes.com for more resources, information, more episodes, ways to work together, downloadable guides and ebooks. And if you're interested in becoming a guest on the show or have a guest suggestion, head to lindseycortes.com/podcast, and there's a form for you to fill out to get on the show. Hey, there's more resources on my YouTube channel, Female Athlete Nutrition, Instagram at female.athlete.nutrition, and private Facebook group, Female Athlete Nutrition. I think you get the point. I'm here to support female athletes by fueling better and becoming fierce, fit, and fueled. Most importantly, if you need help, reach out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next show.